Hello everyone, and welcome to the ProPricer 95101 internal webinar. My name is Esteban Mercado, and I am the product manager for the ProPricer 9 product here at ProPricer. In this segment, I will be going over all of the newest features included in this release. Alright, so before we get into some of the main features in 95101, let's talk about a new server configuration tool we created and some of the features that are for Contractor Edition but tie into other ProPricer products. First, we have the ProPricer Server Config tool. As most of you know, when we moved to 95100, we changed our framework from .NET to .NET Core. With this change came some new requirements, one of which is a requirement to provide and validate an SSL certificate. Now this was possible before, but without this tool, the process was a little difficult. It required editing JSON files, and one small slip-up with the incorrect syntax would throw a number of different errors. This tool was created to streamline the process of selecting and validating the SSL certificate, and ensuring the JSON file was created correctly. To find this tool, you can navigate over to the ProPricer Server Manager's installation directory. Now this is something that your IT department would probably have access to and not the normal user, but again, this is just for demonstration purposes. Once you're there, you'll look for an application called ProPricer Server Config.exe. Once you open it, you'll find a few different options. Now, specific to the SSL certificate, we're only going to focus on the top area over here. This bottom area is used for one of the features we're going to talk about later in this video, Azure AD login configuration. But again, we're just focusing on SSL for now. So, the first field, certificate name, allows you to select or load your SSL certificate from your machine's local store. The host field allows you to specify the host server name. A quick note here, ProPricer requires that the SSL certificate be local to the host machine. Lastly, you'll specify the host server port used for ProPricer. Once you apply that and create the proper configuration, you should be able to access ProPricer 95100 with no issues. Next, we are going to talk about Boe Pro source support. This is a two-part change that improves the integration of Boe Pro and ProPricer Contractor Edition. The first part of this change is the addition of a new column in both task and summary views in Contractor Edition called Boe Source. This column displays the source Boe element each task in CE is associated with. Please note that this column only appears in proposals that were pulled from Boe Pro and will not be visible otherwise. Now to show this, I'm going to switch over to a database that I have connected with Boe Pro and open up a proposal in Task View. Here, you can see the new column and see that it's listing all of the associated BOEs. Now, I'll quickly open up Summary View. And here we have the same thing. The next thing this change did was add functionality to the existing audit report, which allows it to display when Boe Pro data has been modified in Contractor Edition. To demonstrate this, I will open up the audit report by navigating to the Report ribbon and selecting Audit Report. In the Items to Audit list in Report Options, I can scroll down and now see the new item called Boe Sources and can tell the report to view whether they have been modified or not. Again, this will only appear if you are selected on a proposal that was brought over from Boe Pro and will not be visible otherwise. When I run the report, you can see at the bottom that I have a few Boe sources that were modified after being brought over from Boe Pro. This enhancement will help users quickly pinpoint changes and allow them to better perform data validation. Alright, so now we're going to move into some of the main ProPricer specific features, starting with the assembly part name template system setting. So this particular feature has some cascading effect on a few other features we're going to talk about in a minute here, but This particular feature is mainly a system setting that allows users to customize what they define as the uniqueness for their assemblies or part names in the material library. So if you're using materials in ProPricer, detailed materials that is, this allows users to tell ProPricer, hey, what is my part name? What do I define as my part name? In the past, it was defined as just a single field part name. With this new system setting, you can now customize what you define that as. So I'm going to navigate up to my setup ribbon at the top of my screen and select system options. In here, I'm going to go to my system options window and select the material page. In here, we have a couple of new options, starting with the assembly part name template field. So here, we can tell ProPricer, instead of using just the part name as the uniqueness for our material identifiers, we're going to use the part number and a different field. This other field can be any material field that you have defined in your system, but in this case, or for this example, we're using plank code. So you'll see we have part number and plank code. Now this is divided by a space dash space. So anything can be in this space in between the two fields. The fields themselves are the things enclosed in these square looking brackets. But anything in between them, you don't really need anything. You could have these two fields just butted up against each other, or you could have a forward or backward slash, underscore, it doesn't really matter. However you want them to display. But the way that we have this set up, it's going to first display the part name as the part number, then a space dash space with the plank code. So after you define this here, you're going to go ahead and apply and select OK. Ours is already done, so we're just going to go take a look at what that looks like. So I'm going to go to my material library now, and I'm going to open up my parts from my common libraries. So in here, if I were to now create a new part, let's just call this, I'm going to go to my part number field. Let's call this demo test part A. And I'm going to now put something in my plank code field. I'm going to call this 1, 2, 3. So now you'll see that my name template is already starting to populate automatically with what I'm entering. But now once I go ahead and save this fully, I am going to be able to see now I have the part number itself, a space dash space in between, and the plank code field that we have here, the value for that is. So now when I go to my materials in my proposal and I'm choosing the material item from my library, I'm going to be able to use or select this unique identifier. So this can be good for a number of reasons. Let's just say you have the same part in different locations, or in this case different plank codes or things like that, but it's really the same part number, and you need to put different base unit cost information on it. This allows you to do that without having to go into a new product library and separate them there, or so on and so forth. You can keep all the same parts in a single library and just differentiate them with a value from a different material field. So like I said, this particular item has some cascading effects, and that's if you choose to change it and use it. I will note that if you are using this, or if you're upgrading to 9.5, all of your existing parts, as you can see I have some up here, all of your existing parts are going to remain intact and as is. This will only affect new parts going forward. So once you set that template setting up, all new parts after that setting is configured will take effect, or it'll take effect on. So now we're going to go ahead and look at the a couple of other features where this again has those cascading effects on. So the first one is going to be the lookup cost source by part number. So now that we have that new uniqueness for our part, when we go to add these new materials to our proposal, and we do things like consolidation, overriding cost sources and things of that nature, what is ProPricer going to look at, you might be thinking. So that's what these next couple of features kind of address. So with this, I'm going to open up a proposal I have set up here for cost source, or cost source lookups, I should say. So cost source lookups are nothing new. Cost source lookups, I'm going to go ahead and open up this proposal actually in material view. Cost source lookups allow you to basically override a cost source for a part on a proposal that's been consolidated. So this particular proposal has been consolidated. If I scroll to the right on these particular parts, you're going to see that there is a cost source selected. So cost source lookup allows me to click in here, click this little ellipses button, and override that particular part. So I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel here. I'm going to go to a part that actually has the new uniqueness that we've set up with the assembly part name. Now, this is a part that I've already configured in the past. You'll notice that these are the exact same part numbers, except one has the additional field associated to it. So this was set up prior to me setting up the unique identifier or the part name assembly template, and this is set up afterwards. So now if I click this line item and go to override or do a cost source lookup on this particular element, you're going to see it's going to pull up all the quotes and POs associated to that new full unique name. So it's the part number and the material field that I've associated to it, or the material field value, I should say. So you might be thinking, okay, where is everything else? I know I have for this particular part, I know I have a ton more cost sources, more quotes, more POs, and so on and so forth. If you look at the top here, we are looking at cost source details for materials with the name. So that new unique name that we've set up. Now you can click this drop down selector and change that to part number instead. And now it's going to look specifically at the number field, giving you a lot more values here. So now this is looking at all the cost sources for that particular number. So you got to think about when you're, after you run consolidation, or when you're, setting this up, what do you want ProPricer to look at? If you think about it, that new uniqueness, the reason it's limited is because now we're looking at the full uniqueness of this, the number and the name. It's only going to look at cost source information that have information for both of those pieces together. All right, so that is the lookup cost source by part number. So the next thing that this affects is consolidate by part number. Consolidate by part number, it runs into the same thing. When you run consolidation on your proposal, basically what you're telling ProPricer to do is go look at all of the parts on my proposal, and for all like parts, we're going to combine all the quantities so we can get the pricing for those parts based on the rules that we have set up for prioritization. Do I want to look at quotes first? Do I want to look at POs first, etc.? So now that we have that new uniqueness set up, where we're looking at the part number and the material field value for plant code, it's going to by default look at that unless I tell ProPricer to do something different. So when I go into this proposal, I'm going to look at this in material view as well. When I look at this proposal, and when I go to consolidate it, so I'm going to do that did that a little fast, but I'm going to go to the proposal ribbon, look at my material section over here, and look at consolidate material. And I go to run a rule. I just have a single rule up here that looks at the lowest costs. It's set up as any, doesn't matter if it's a quote, PO, miscellaneous, etc. It's just looking for the lowest cost. When I go to consolidate, in previous times, it would look at the name field, which would just be the name. But now it's looking at the name field, which is the combination of those two fields together. So I can right here tell ProPricer, do I want to consolidate by the name, the new unique part? So I'm going to get less quantity for each part, most likely, with that new uniqueness than I would if I were to choose by part number. So part number is the second thing that I can, the other thing I can choose. So where even if I have a part with a different plant code, as if I want to get quotes for, just that part number itself, I can choose that here. There's also a system setting where if you go to the setup ribbon and go to system options, In the same place where we configured that, under the material page here, there is a new consolidate material by, and you can choose the default option to be either the new unique name or part number. So depending on what your organization does, this is the option that you're going to want to set up when you set this up. So just remember that. All right, now we're moving on to proposal-specific part info. This particular enhancement allows users to make proposal-specific changes to materials that they were previously unable to do. If I open up my proposal material view, then add a part from the material library, I can now make changes to things like the part's description, type, and other fields. Those changes only live on that one proposal, and users don't have to worry about them flowing back to the library. So in this example, I'm just going to go ahead and add a part from our library. One thing else to note is that with these new changes, we do have a few new columns to mention here. So you have source library and source material. Previously, when you would add a part to the proposal, it would come from the assembly part column. Now it's going to come from the source material column. So we're going to select the common library, and the material we're going to choose, I'm just going to select this part right here. And now I can save this, and if I wanted to, I can go ahead and make a change to the part's description. This was not previously possible, and again, this only affects this one proposal. So I can go ahead and save it, and we're good to go. Another thing this change brought is the ability to build out full BOMs directly on a proposal without the need to create it in the library first. Previously, you could create proposal-specific parts on a proposal, but that was it. Now you can create assemblies and associate child elements to those assemblies and go as deep as you want. To demonstrate, I'll quickly create a proposal-specific assembly. So I'm going to move down to this line, and I am going to, under type, under assembly part, I'm just going to call this test assembly. For part number, I'm going to just also call it test assembly. And you're probably wondering about the new uniqueness we talked about. Since this is proposal-specific part information, that new part uniqueness only affects the library, so it doesn't affect here. But I'm going to go ahead and change the type to assembly here. And I'm going to associate this to a task. Lastly, I'm going to assign a resource to this assembly. I'm just going to assign purchase parts just for this example. And once I save that, I can now right-click this assembly. You'll notice that it's not associated to a library or anything like that. But I can now right-click this assembly and select Add Child Element. Again, this is something that was previously not possible. You'll see that it's now a level 2 element of this one. And I can go ahead and start. I'm just going to call this test part 1. I'm going to copy this over to my other field here. It's listed as a part. I could add other assemblies too and just go as deep down the rabbit hole as I want, but I think you get the idea. Again, assign it a resource. I was going to say purchase parts. And then, obviously I could associate pricing and things like that too. But now I can collapse this level, and you can see I have now a proposal-specific assembly. So that is another part of this enhancement here, and we're really excited about it. Next, we have unit of measure conversion. This is one of the biggest features we implemented for materials in this release. What this feature allows you to do is convert your materials unit cost depending on the unit of measure you are using. Let's say you purchase a part from a vendor who lists the price for that part in inches. But when you list that part on the proposal, you want to list that same part but in feet, or another number of scenarios where this can come into play. As long as you're using one of the newly listed standard units of measure shown in the drop-down list on this field, you can now do so, and ProPricer will update the unit cost accordingly. The drop-down list, as I mentioned, can be found in the proposal or in the library when selecting a value from the UM column, but the field may be hidden. I'm going to open the drop-down menu for the part that I have selected right here on the screen. You can see it contains all the standard units of measure for length, area, weight, and volume. Also, you'll notice that there are multiple variations of spelling for each unit. As long as you're using an appropriate variation of spelling for your desired unit, ProPricer will consider that a standard and allow for a conversion. To perform the conversion, just open up a proposal in either Task or Material View. In this scenario, I'm just going to choose Material View. You're going to want to add a part and spread however many of that part you'd like to on the proposal. Again, in this scenario, I believe I have something already pre-configured, and I do have a part here. So I have a part, it's called just 1, and I have this part spread 100 times on my proposal, and I just want to make sure that my 1, it's being spread, which I confirmed, and 2, the unit of measure is being displayed. This is typically a hidden field on proposals, like I mentioned earlier, but if you right-click in that top grid, go to View, and either Show or Select Columns, you'll be able to unhide that grid. So currently this part is listed in centimeters, but let's just say I want to change it to a different unit of measure. I can go ahead and click the drop-down menu, and I'm going to want to filter for something within the same category. So this is a length category. I'm going to want to filter for another length item, and let's just say I want to convert this to feet or yards or something of that nature. I can select it, click Consolidate, tell ProPricer I do want to save these changes, apply my same lowest cost rule set as before, and you're going to see the unit cost currently is at 0.03, and once I process with that new unit of measure, you're going to see that that price changes accordingly. A quick note here, if you're upgrading to 95101 from a previous build and are currently using materials, they will move over just fine. They'll keep whatever unit of measure that they were brought in with. If the unit of measure is part of the new list, like we discussed, it will be considered a standard unit of measure. If it's not, ProPricer will still accept the unit of measure, but will consider it non-standard and treat it as just text. Now keep in mind, the new conversion only works with standard units of measure. So if you have any text values, they will be unable to perform any conversions at this time. Also, the conversions only work for units of measure within the same category, like I mentioned. So in our example from earlier, inches to feet, those are both categorized as length and can be converted, but something like length to weight will not work at this time. All right, the next thing that we're going to talk about is a non-material feature, but it's Azure AD login type support. So what Azure AD is, it's a cloud-based Active Directory, and ProPricer now supports connecting with and utilizing that as a login type. Previously, we've had two different login types. We had ProPricer login type, where you have a ProPricer generated username and password, or Windows authentication. Now we have the support to connect to and log in with an Azure Active Directory account. So to set this up, there's a couple of different things that you need to do. One, this will probably require specific permissions, but you'll need to navigate over to the Setup ribbon at the top of your screen, go to System Options, and if you go to the Security page here, you're going to see that we currently have login type of ProPricer for this instance, but if I click the drop down, you're going to see a new option called Azure AD. So I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel here. I have another instance of ProPricer where this is configured, so I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate what that looks like. I am going to just right click here and choose this instance, and if you are using it, you're going to be able to Azure AD may be selected by default. I think I have mine set up to choose, so I'm going to hit Azure AD, and I'll go ahead and select OK. Now, typically what this is going to do the first time around, and potentially more, is it's going to bring up a login window for you to log into your Azure AD using your email address and password provided by your organization. I've already done that, so it's just allowing me to boot right in with what I've logged in with today. So if I go into Help and About and Session Info, I should see that I'm logged in as myself and all is good. So another piece of the configuration has to do with that server configuration tool that we talked about earlier. Now I'm going to go ahead and close out of this instance and just pop that open so we can see what I'm talking about. So I have a shortcut to that tool listed under my miscellaneous tabs. I'm going to go ahead and pop that open. So we talked about the connection data section earlier, and again, this has to do with your SSL certificates and etc. The bottom area is where typically your IT environment would configure your Azure AD instance. So they would select whether you're using a public or government Azure AD, and then they would set up the tenant ID and the client ID. And again, if you remember from earlier, you still got to go in ProPricer and tell it to use the Azure AD login type. So those three things will allow you to utilize this. But this opens up the door to your organization being able to use things such as multi-factor authentication through Azure, and just makes the security side of login a little bit more controllable for your organization. All right, moving on, we have another feature here, hopping back to material type features. It's called copy field values down in the bill of materials. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this proposal to talk about it. But what this feature does, if you're familiar with the fill handle in Excel, or just a lot of copy features in Excel, this allows you to basically populate a field and copy that value down to X amount of other rows in a very quick fashion. So I'm going to open up this, I've opened up this proposal in material view just to demonstrate, and I'm going to go ahead and expand the entire bill of material that I have on this particular proposal. I have 233 items here, and let's just say I needed to, for whatever reason, change the plant code on this assembly. Whether I want to do it at the top level assembly, which is level 1, and hit everything underneath it, or if I want to do it to a sub-level assembly. For the first demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and do it to a sub-assembly. So I have this level 3 assembly highlighted here. Let's say I want to change the plant code for this from XYZ to ABC. I can do that, save the line, and then now I can right-click and select an option called Fill Down. When I do that, it's going to highlight the field that I actually right-clicked in. It's smart enough to know where you click, so if I were to click Resources or something like that, that would be the item that's checked. But since I clicked a material field called plant code, that's what's highlighted. I could now choose other options to also copy down, but for this scenario, I'm just going to leave it as is. And I'm going to go ahead and hit process. It's going to warn me that all the existing elements will be overridden and ask me if I still want to proceed. I'll say OK. And now you can see all of these items just copied down, but they stopped at a certain point. So I'm going to highlight the next row where it didn't make the change and scroll back to the left here. You'll notice that it stopped when it saw another item at the same level. So what it does is if you do it at a particular element, it's going to change it for that element and everything, or every child element underneath it. Once it sees something at the same or higher level, it's going to no longer copy down. If you did want to copy something down to the entire list of items, you'd want to do it at the very top level. So if I were to make that same change here and go ahead and change this to ABC, save it, right click and select fill down again and process and select OK. Now everything here that's underneath that level 1 assembly has been updated to ABC. So you just got to have to know where to make that change, but it's a quick way in the ProPricer user interface to copy values down. Another scenario is if you wanted to update, so let's just say you have a new material resource you want to update and associate to all your parts, and that new resource has a new profit percentage or an escalating factor or something of that nature. You could use this to easily copy that information down. The next item on the list is the auto reconnect function. Now, I don't have anything to demonstrate for this one in particular, but we'll briefly discuss it. This isn't necessarily a feature, more of a background function that takes place. It was implemented to help users who were kicked from a ProPricer session for a short amount of time automatically reconnect without interruption. This could include anything from loss of internet, a dropped VPN connection, etc. If a user gets disconnected from their ProPricer session, it will remain active on the server for 5 minutes, allowing the client to automatically reconnect without interrupting the user's work. All right, moving on to the next feature, display labor hours in the 15-2 report. So I'm going to go ahead and clean up some of the space on my screen here, just to kind of get everything situated. There's not a whole lot to this particular feature. All we did here is we have a report in our reports list called the 15-2 line item summary report. And the only change to this report that we made was add the ability to include or view labor hours in addition to the other cost elements on this report. So if you open up the report, I went a little fast there, but I went to the reports ribbon, opened up my report list, and then opened up the 15-2 line item summary report. If you scroll down to the reference text input, you're going to notice now that this item here, the labor hours, is now selectable in the drop-down list. It was not previously here before, so you can include that, print your report to the screen, and now display your labor hours. Moving on to the next feature, we have material field editing what if. So this is a new what if feature specific to materials, and the feature is called field editing material. So unlike other what ifs, we didn't group this on the proposal ribbon in the what ifs grouping. This is actually grouped under the material grouping of the same ribbon, and you'll see a new icon here called field editing material. With us putting this button here, it had us actually move some other material features down, and since we lost a little bit of real estate here, we moved some into this more option here. So target factor and quantity redistribution were relocated into this more area. So what does the what if do? So field editing material is very similar to the other field editing what ifs that we have. We have field editing task and field editing resource. The way I like to describe them is sort of a find and replace function. So if you want to change a value on a specific field from one thing to another, and you don't want to have to go do it via import and export, you don't want to have to do it manually in the proposal, etc., you can use these what if features to change that. And previously we didn't have anything at the material level that was capable of doing so. So now we have this item. So if I go ahead and open it up, I'll see the screen for field editing material, and I'm looking at this particular proposal right here. Let me just close it out and open up that actual proposal, and I'm going to open it up actually in material view. Once I have it in material view, I'm going to just expand all my elements so you can see this kind of in action. But I have all of these fields, and a lot of which I can choose from in this particular tool. But let's just say I want to change one particular value from one element to another. I can go ahead and select from the proposal ribbon, I can select field editing material, and I can choose which field value I want to change from and what I want to change it to. So, we already demonstrated the plant code with the fill down, so you can do something very similar here. I can change everything from ABC to XYZ or etc. Or if I want to change a resource, I can swap one for another. Or something else you can do if you want to change the fee on all of your values, for this particular proposal. Let's just say by default the fee for your materials is 10%, and you want to change it to 12% of something of that nature. This is one of the fields you have access to changing. So again, I'm just going to change everything from let me see what I have here on this one. I have 0 plant code, so this is a different proposal. So I'm going to go ahead and hit field editing. I'm going to change things from nothing to ABC, and I can narrow down the selection if I'd like via task or material selection. So if I only want to perform this to materials on certain tasks or specific materials, certain parts, certain assemblies, etc., I can use any of these selections to narrow down the scope, but I'm just going to do it to the whole proposal. I can add a comment like on all of the other what ifs. I could copy this before making the change if I wanted to, but I'm just going to go ahead and process. It's going to ask me if I want to change that value. I'm going to say applied to all items in this field and just hit replace just so it goes through everything. So 466 materials were processed and updated. So I'm going to go ahead and hit close. You're probably wondering why it says 466 when I'm only showing 233 here. It's because I have other materials on the proposal as well. So going back to this, I'm going to expand all my elements again, and you'll see everything has a plan code of ABC. So again, another way that we are allowing users to make quick and easy changes in the user interface via this field editing material, what if. All right, moving on to the next change. This is a very quick one. What we've done, for those of you who know, we've since changed the days of ASCII and XML imports to our new import-export tool, and that's kind of the most updated, maintained tool that we use to bring mass amounts of data in and out of ProPricer. That tool is not anything new, although it does support a lot of these new features. The one thing that we did is we actually added a dedicated button for it within ProPricer. So you no longer have to go to your client's installation directory, navigate to C drive, program files, etc. Now if you just come to external data on your ribbon, you're going to see a new tools grouping with a new ProPricer import export button right here. You can select that, launch the import export tool, perform all your imports, and get on with your day. I don't really have anything to import, so I just wanted to show you what that button's like. You no longer have to sacrifice shortcut space here, which is another way that you could have launched it, but again, it's a pretty important tool, so we made a dedicated button for it. The next feature that we have here is summary field for materials. So there's not a whole lot to this one either, but it will help out a lot of our customers. In previous times when you went into material view, you were able to view all of your parts spread across your proposal, but you were only able to break them down by task. This feature basically expands or makes other summary fields visible in that material view. In that material view. So I'm going to close out of some of these tabs that I have open here, and I'm going to open up this proposal here in material view. And if I expand all of my parts on this particular one, you'll see I have task and WBS displayed, which may have been ones that already were available, but now let's just say I want to view my parts by CLIN or SLIN or whatever other summary field I may have. I can go to View, or right click in the grid first, I should say, navigate to View, hover over Show Columns, and under Summary Fields just select All. Now I can see, and another cool trick here, I'm just going to right click and say Best Fit All Columns, so you can see those names of those columns clearly. That's not something new, but just something to make this a little bit more visible. So now I can see all my parts by estimator. I can filter, sort, etc. by any of the summary fields that I have listed here. So again, not a whole lot to that one. Another thing that we did here is we removed some archive versions from this particular build. So as of a few years ago, we added the functionality when you archive or prepare for government, you could now archive back to an older version if, let's just say, the prime contractor or customer who you're sending this to is on an older build of ProPricer. If you were on a newer one and you tried to archive and send them a proposal, you were unable to do so, or you could send it, but they were unable to restore it back into their system because it was created on a newer version. So we created a function in the archive and prepare for government, which allows you to, I'll just select archive proposal, which allows you to send it back to your archive back to an older version. What we do with every release, just to keep things up to date and keep features, newer features working properly, is we clean up this list and remove some versioning here. So now it goes down to 93107 as the earliest, and so if you archive a proposal, that's as far back as you can go. So just please make sure that you're updated to the latest versions of ProPricer as often as you can. You're going to be getting the latest features, the latest fixes if there are any, and things of that nature. So It's always best, and we always recommend that you keep up to date whenever possible. All right. The next feature we'll talk about is the days function being added to the unit cost formula editor. Users can use this function to calculate the number of days between two date type material fields. The value can then be used as a factor to help calculate a material's unit cost. Unit cost formula can be found in the proposal properties on the pricing page within the material folder. Once in the editor, you can now use the days function in your calculations by just typing days and encasing everything else in parentheses. The last thing we'll talk about are new fields that you can add to a custom reports layout. So these fields are not necessarily new in general, but they are new to the report designer layout. The fields I'm mentioning can be found in an algorithm. So if we open up the algorithm that we have here, you may not necessarily have access to this, but once we open it, if we go to our total definitions page, here is where we would define what our organization considers overhead, G&A, total cost, profit and fee, everything down to total price. So whether we have multiple algorithms, or maybe we're on a prime contractor side or a government side where we might have multiple proposals with different algorithms, here's where we tell ProPricer, hey, I want to generalize what these element names are. So I can use these general element fields in reports versus having to spell out each one and create a new version of a report for different proposals with different algorithms. So if I go to my report designer and open up any report, I can go into edit mode on that report. And when I'm here, I can now select an area where I would want to input a field. And if I scroll all the way to the bottom here, I now have access to these new, not to these new elements, but to these elements on the report designer. Previously, again, the only ones that were accessible were total profit fee element and total price element. So this will come in handy for any sort of comparisons that you might do, things of that nature. When you want to see high level elements and you have different algorithm element names. And that concludes all the features here in today's webinar. If you have any other questions, feel free to always reach out to technical support or reach out to me directly. Thank you very much for watching, and we appreciate it and hope you upgrade soon.